In the silent corridors of the Vatican, where secrets are kept for centuries, rumors began to gain strength. These were not just whispers about Pope Francis's fragile health, but rather discreet movements, changes in security, and a noticeable unease among the older members of the Curia. Some saw signs of a cycle coming to an end, as if something, or someone, was merely waiting for the right moment to take its place. Forgotten prophecies seemed to gain new life, and ancient documents began to circulate once again among the few who still knew how to interpret them. Meanwhile, in the world outside the sacred walls, global leaders were meeting with unusual frequency. Cutting-edge technology was starting to be used to control essential aspects of human life. Biometric identification was no longer a novelty, but was now used to pay, open doors, and even determine who could access certain services. The economy, religion, and politics were becoming increasingly intertwined. What did all this mean? Could we be on the verge of the arrival of the eighth king? Welcome to another night, where mysteries never sleep. I'm Midnight, and this is 7 Nights. Before we begin, I'd like to ask for your help. Like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. It's just one click, but it makes a huge difference for YouTube to share the videos with more people, and for me to keep bringing you this content. I'm counting on you. Let's get into the video. From the beginning, there was something different about Jorge Mario Bergoglio. When he was elected in 2013, many celebrated the first Latin American pope, the simple man who wore worn-out shoes and preferred public transportation over the luxuries of the Vatican. But others saw a sign. The list of Saint Malachy, a prophet from the 12th century, named him as the last, the so-called Peter the Roman. What exactly did that mean? And why had this prophecy resurfaced with such force right now? Francis never adopted the name Peter. Even so, he was a Jesuit with Italian blood, coming from the end of the world, as he himself said. His actions seemed to carry a weight beyond religion. To some, he was not just guiding the faithful, he was setting the stage. And when he began to speak of resignation, something rare among popes, many stopped to pay attention. Why would such a beloved spiritual leader hint at his own departure? Within the Vatican, subtle changes were noticed by keen observers. Fewer public appearances, canceled trips, silence in the most delicate decisions. Closed sources reported fatigue, but not just physical. There seemed to be excessive care regarding what came next. The transition seemed planned, thought out in every detail. But why so much caution about the immediate future? Were they anticipating something they didn't want to reveal? Internal documents, never officially confirmed, spoke of an emergency transition. That alone sent chills. And we're not talking about a simple religious succession, but a movement that touched power in various spheres. Something was being orchestrated, but out of public view. Who would really take the reins after Francis? The presence of unusual figures inside the Vatican raised even more alarm. Known names from technology, global finance, even political leaders from the East, all received in discreet audiences. These were not traditional diplomatic meetings. Some lasted hours. Others weren't even disclosed. What was the Vatican negotiating, and with whom? At the same time, newspapers quietly published that influential cardinals were holding secret meetings. What few knew was that a name was already being considered. But he was not a successor in the traditional sense. He was a new figure. More adaptable, more political, more symbolic. Were they trying to merge religion with something bigger? Or give a new face to spiritual power? The death of a pope is always marked by ancient rituals. But what if these rituals were just a facade for something else? What if there were no conclave, but rather an imposition? What if behind closed doors, the new leader had already been chosen, not by faith, but by global convenience? Old records began to circulate again. The Liber Pontificalis, forgotten by many, contained details of signs that would accompany the end of a papal era: cosmic events, tremors, symbolic apparitions. In 2023, 3 silent earthquakes struck areas near the Vatican. Too small to alarm, but perfectly located. Coincidence? Additionally, strange technical failures hit the internal systems of the Holy See. Encrypted data, messages that vanished from archives. The responsible parties claimed it was maintenance. But those who know the Vatican understand, nothing there happens by chance. That was when internal messages began circulating among high-ranking clergy. Short phrases, no names, with apocalyptic references. The time has come. The 8th is near. No one said who, but everyone seemed to understand what it was about, or at least pretended not to know. For Bible scholars, There is no doubt. The eighth king mentioned in Revelation 17 represents something darker. He is of the seven and is going to his destruction. This would imply that he would not merely be a new pope, but the synthesis of all previous ones. A new kind of leadership, without soul, without history, but wearing all the masks. The death of Francis will not be merely the end of a pontificate. It is the last piece falling in a game board that was already set. What comes next is not just a successor. It is a new cycle. And in this new cycle, perhaps faith, politics, and power will walk together down a single and dangerous path. There is a passage in the scriptures that has intrigued scholars and believers for centuries. Revelation 17, verse 11. It speaks of an eighth king, a king who comes after seven, but who in some way belongs to them, and who goes to perdition. At first glance, it's just a metaphor, another of the many mysterious visions of Revelation. But what if it's not? What if this eighth king is already among us, not as a ruler, but as something greater or worse? This figure would not appear out of nowhere. He would emerge when the world is hungry for a solution. Look around. Successive crises, collapsing institutions, widespread distrust. Politics? In decay. Religion? Fragmented. Economy? Controlled by a few hands. And amid this silent collapse, the desire grows for someone who can unite, who can fix, who can save. Have you ever stopped to think why so many voices, across different sectors, are calling for a global moral leadership? The World Economic Forum, for example, has already openly spoken about the need for a new kind of leadership. Not just economic, but ethical, spiritual, a face that represents everyone. A message that pleases the majority. In 2022, this concept was called Messianic Leadership at a closed conference in Davos. Coincidence or preparation? Do you recall any other time when world leaders sought a savior to unite the entire planet? But don't think this started now. The idea of unifying faith and power is ancient. Very ancient. The Roman Empire, the Crusaders, even the Templars tried this. But the means never existed. Today, with technology, this fusion is not only possible, it is inevitable. And when one controls information, faith, and money, what else is needed to rule the world? Imagine what happens when a pope dies and the world no longer wants a religious figure on the throne, but rather a mediator, someone with a modern face and popular ideas. Someone who represents all beliefs and at the same time none. Is the world ready to accept such a leader? More than that, would you even notice if this were already happening? This new figure would not appear dressed as a prophet. He wouldn't deliver fiery sermons. He would be charming, articulate, smiling. The kind of person everyone wants to hear. Who appears in the news, on social media, who talks about peace and technology in the same sentence. How many faces like that have you seen rise to prominence without the majority knowing where they came from? Experts in geopolitics and theology are already discussing this discreetly. They say this eighth king would not govern a country. He would be accepted. He would be invited. Religions would see him as a symbol, governments as an advisor, corporations as an ally, a new kind of power. But what happens when all powers are concentrated in a single voice? And the term perdition remains engraved in the sacred text. What does that mean? That he would bring ruin? That his rise would signal the end of something, or of everything? There is no mention of war. It speaks of illusion, an acceptance so deep that no one would dare to question. After all, who would reject hope when it's sold as salvation? Many theorists believe that this leader is already in motion, that he will not come from above, but from within. From within institutions, social movements, global initiatives. A face that always appears at the right moments. A name everyone knows, but no one fears. And what if that's exactly how he's meant to appear? The danger is silent. This figure will not demand faith, only sympathy. He will not ask for obedience, but trust. And when everyone is in agreement, when all religions have found common ground, will there be any room left for free will? For doubt? For resistance? The media has already begun to play its part. Terms like New Age of Consciousness, global spirituality, and unifying leaders are being normalized. Have you noticed how this is everywhere? In peace speeches, environmental summits, health campaigns. Everything is merging. Everything is converging. The arrival of the eighth king will not be an event. It will be a process. And it may have already begun. What comes after, no one knows for sure. But one thing is certain. By the time we realize it, he will already be seated on the throne, not of Rome, but of the world. Imagine for a moment that the three greatest powers driving the world, money, faith, and the state, ceased to be independent and began to walk side by side, not as declared allies, but as silent gears of the same machine. Sounds exaggerated? Then it's worth taking another look at what's already happening right before our eyes. Money, for instance, no longer has the same face. It left paper and went digital. But it didn't stop there. Now it's integrated into your body. Payment with your palm, with facial recognition with your iris. What was once about security has become convenience. And the inevitable question is, how far will this go? In the name of practicality, what are we authorizing without realizing? And faith, which for centuries divided people by doctrine, is now being sold as a universal product. Major religious leaders speak more and more about unity, global fraternity, about one God for all. Sounds beautiful, doesn't it? But what happens when millennia-old symbols are diluted in the name of a peace agreement? Are we trading depth for acceptance? The Vatican took a step that went unnoticed by many: the creation of the Human Fraternity Committee, a project that brings together Christians, Muslims, and Jews to share the same prayer space. It's not a theory, it's reality. The Abrahamic house in Abu Dhabi is already standing. But is it merely a gesture of tolerance, or the first temple of a new global religion? Meanwhile, nation-states are becoming increasingly irrelevant. What was once decided by presidents is now determined behind closed doors at institutions like the UN, the IMF, and the World Economic Forum. And who takes part in these decisions? You. Someone you elected? When decisions that affect the world are made by those who are not accountable to the people, can we still call it democracy? Now imagine these three powers functioning as one. The same system that regulates your money, controls your faith, and dictates the rules of your behavior. Sounds impossible? But there are already tests in various countries with unified digital identity systems. These include your financial, medical, social, and even ideological information. And if you are incompatible, the system can simply erase you. This is already in the testing phase in Brazil, India, and Sweden. Central banks are creating state digital currencies, the so-called CBDCs, which allow every cent, every transaction to be tracked. With a single command, your account can be frozen. That's control, but it's being sold as modernization. And who's behind it? Governments? Not just them. Big tech companies, the ones you use every day, already have direct partnerships with religious institutions and political bodies. They know what you read, what you believe, what you consume. When faith becomes data, it ceases to be spiritual and becomes an algorithm. And who programs that algorithm? Meanwhile, the rhetoric is wrapped in beautiful words: security, inclusion, well-being. But no one talks about limits. No one talks about consequences. The web of control closes not with imposition, but with smiles. And that's where the danger lies, when imprisonment comes disguised as freedom. And the most unsettling part is how we accept it. One step at a time. One app, one new feature, one requirement here, another there. And without realizing it, we're already inside. The question is there any way out? Or have we already passed the point of no return? This union, money, faith, and state, is no longer an idea. It's a structure under construction. A system that, once complete, will not need tanks or dictators, because it will function as an invisible organism. And when everything is connected, will we still be able to disconnect? It is not made of iron, nor does it have visible numbers. There is no tattoo on the arm, no chip forcibly implanted. The new mark is voluntary, digital, clean, integrated. And contrary to what many imagine, it is not in the future. It is in the present. Silent, elegant, and efficient, it is already part of the daily life of millions of people who haven't even realized they have already been marked. In supermarkets, stores, airports, the palm of the hand has become a wallet. The iris has become a password. The face unlocks doors, accesses bank accounts, dispenses medication, all in the name of convenience. But has anyone stopped to ask, who stores this data? Who sets the rules? And if access is denied, what's left? In the United States, Amazon already allows purchases with just the palm of your hand. In China, the social credit system links behavior to the right to travel, study, even dine out. In India, Aadhaar, the largest biometric system in the world, is required for basic government benefits. The question is no longer if it will be widely adopted, but when it will be impossible to live outside of it. There is something almost hypnotic about this process. Technology doesn't impose, it invites. It presents itself as a solution, never as a threat. But when all paths lead to a single global identity, a single access method, and a single verification system, what happens to those who don't fit in? Authorities call it sovereign digital identity, a beautiful name for a dangerous concept, a unique registry that carries everything about you: name, medical history, political stance, religious beliefs, consumer profile, location history. And all this accessible by whom? Companies? Governments? Algorithms? The logic is simple. Without this identity, you can't buy, can't sell, can't move, and in many cases, can't even exist. The system is absolute because you depend on it for everything. And because it is invisible, there are no trenches, no resistance. There is only acceptance or exclusion. The message is always the same: more security, less bureaucracy. But the truth is, the more integrated the system, the more vulnerable you become. One changed password, one misinterpreted gesture, and your digital life can be frozen. This isn't a theory, it's already happened. In countries like Nigeria and the Philippines, citizens were blocked from basic services due to biometric registration failures. And what if the error isn't technical but intentional? This is where prophecy meets reality. Revelation 13 speaks of a mark, without which no one can buy or sell. People laughed at this for centuries. But what if the mark isn't symbolic, nor visible, but technological? What if it's a system and not a symbol? The new mark doesn't need to be on the skin. It's in the code. And the code is accepted voluntarily, often with enthusiasm. A new app, a new update, a new promise of convenience. But in the end, everything leads to the same place: total dependence. And total dependence, in any era of history, has always meant control. Some voices are warning. Cybersecurity experts, scholars of tech ethics, independent religious leaders. But their messages are muffled, diluted, or labeled as alarmist. After all, who wants to hear that convenience has a price? Who is willing to stop everything and disconnect? The most dangerous thing of all is that there won't be a specific day when the mark is imposed. It will come in phases, in protocols, in updates, and when we finally notice, all access will be tied to a single point. And by then, it will be too late to ask, how did we get here? Something silent is happening in the world of faith. There are no major ruptures, no direct confrontations. The movement is subtle, almost imperceptible, like a tide slowly rising. But it is there. Churches are changing their liturgies. Pastors, priests, and religious leaders are adopting a new vocabulary. Terms like spiritual inclusivity, universal faith, and transcendent unity are appearing in pulpits and on screens. The message is simple. It doesn't matter the path, all roads lead to the same place. But do they really? The concept of absolute truth is beginning to fade. Doctrines, once firm, are becoming malleable. Hell becomes a metaphor. Sin, a matter of interpretation. And God, an indistinct energy, shaped by the listener's will. It seems like spiritual evolution. But could this be a programmed dilution? A deliberate dismantling of the essence to make fusion easier? This is where the term global religion begins to emerge. Officially, no one proclaims it. But between the lines, it's present in interfaith conferences, in international faith pacts, and in the increasingly ecumenical speeches of major leaders. The Vatican, for example, has been one of the greatest promoters of this global spiritual unity. And with its prestige, its message echoes everywhere. But what exactly is being united? Documents like the Document on Human Fraternity, signed in Abu Dhabi by representatives of the Vatican and Islam, advocate for a single human family guided by common spiritual values. The intention sounds noble, but the question remains: which doctrine will be preserved? Which will be abandoned? When all truths attempt to coexist, will any remain? Alternative religious leaders, once on the fringes, are now being promoted as representatives of the new spirituality. Figures who avoid doctrine and prefer to speak of energy, connection, harmony. They are charismatic, modern, accessible. But their message rarely mentions spiritual responsibility. Everything is acceptance. Everything is love. But is everything real? Many of these leaders participate in global forums, promote environmental, technological, and social causes. They do not preach just to their followers, but to the world. They are the spiritual face of a new order that seems to be under construction. A spirituality without roots, without cross, without altar. Only stage, microphone, and applause. Have you seen it? The new faith does not demand repentance, only adherence. There is no confrontation with conscience, only messages of comfort. And that pleases. That welcomes. But it also lulls. Truth is no longer something to be sought. It becomes whatever is most convenient. At this point, any resistance is seen as intolerance. Those who question are outdated. Those who disagree, dangerous. Meanwhile, ancient rituals are losing space. Symbolism is reimagined. Commandments are reinterpreted. Ancient prayers are replaced by generic mantras. There is no longer direction, only sensation. And the more the faithful adapt, the further they are from the origin. Is it possible to keep faith intact within a system that seeks to reshape it? Culture also helps build this new scenario. Films, music, and series promote a confused spirituality, where everything is valid and nothing is sacred. Children learn early that the divine is optional, that evil is relative, and that personal choice is the only true altar. Is that freedom or disguised indoctrination? And then comes the moment of convergence. When all religions have been sufficiently reshaped, it will be possible to present a single truth acceptable to all. A centralized, universal faith, ready to be integrated into the control system already being formed. And those who do not accept it will be marginalized as extremists, even if they only wish to hold on to what they have always believed. The most disturbing part is that all this is happening without fanfare, without decrees, without visible pressure, because it is not imposition. It is gradual replacement, an invisible exchange. When the old faith becomes unrecognizable, many will still think they are believing, but they will only be following a perfect copy of the original truth. Signs don't always appear with a bang. Sometimes they come disguised as trends, as progress, as modernity. They're in the repeating headlines, in the new laws few people read, in standardized speeches across different languages. They're in digital blackouts that last seconds, in unexplained alerts popping up on phones, in silent testing of systems not yet officially announced. And most people don't see, or prefer not to see. In recent years, the world has faced increasingly frequent and anomalous natural events. Earthquakes in unlikely regions, volcanoes dormant for centuries erupting, extreme, unseasonal weather. For scientists, it's climate change. For the more observant, it's a warning. How can we explain these phenomena happening in sync with global power meetings? Coincidence? Or intentional synchronicity? In the digital sphere, things are also changing too quickly. Algorithms know what you think before you even form the thought. Cameras read your expression, your emotion, your fatigue. Artificial intelligences write political speeches, draft sermons, create human faces that don't exist. At what point did reality stop being something we live and become something we program? Failures in major institutions' systems have become more frequent. In March 2024, the Vatican suffered a complete shutdown of its internal communication network. Official reason, technical maintenance. But leaked documents suggest that, on that very day, confidential data from meetings with global leaders disappeared from the records. Coincidence? Or someone covering their tracks? The media, in turn, repeats narratives. News about digital surveillance, currency unification, information control appears once, then vanishes. They're normalized, as if they were just one more piece of news among many. But have you noticed how no one is surprised anymore? As if the absurd were being slowly diluted until it feels inevitable. Artists, influencers, and celebrities repeat scripted phrases, support identical causes, promote the same symbols. Many say it's just marketing. But is it really? Some suggest this is part of a social engineering project, shaping behaviors through repetition, emotion, saturation. And by the time you realize it, you believe in something you never chose. Urban architecture has also changed. Smart cities, cameras on every corner, motion sensors, mass facial recognition. All integrated, all connected, all monitored. And the message is always the same: safety, efficiency, comfort. But where are the boundaries? Who set the rules? And why is no one discussing them? Even in visual symbols, there are subtle changes. The rising use of stylized eyes, triangles, fusions of religious icons. They appear in logos, cultural events, health campaigns. None of it is accidental. Symbols speak. They evoke. They prepare. Have you ever wondered why certain patterns appear across all continents, with only slight variations? Education is another front. Elite schools are adopting narratives that blend global spirituality, universal acceptance, and digital ethics. Children learn early that the world is heading toward total unification. That questioning is polarizing. That resisting is not evolving. Is this education or conditioning? Meanwhile, the reaction of the masses is apathy. They're tired, oversaturated, numbed by an excess of information and distraction. Most just watch, but a small fraction begins to connect the dots, begins to notice that the world is being redesigned, not by governments, but by systems, not with weapons, but with algorithms. And when these signs are noticed, something shifts. The gaze becomes more attentive. Doubt sets in, and then comes the inevitable question: how much longer will these signs remain just signs before they become consolidated reality? Some say evil arrives with violence, with chaos, with screams. But true danger walks in silence. It slips into laws, disguises itself as progress, smiles through rehearsed speeches. What once sounded like theory is now routine. What once seemed distant is already among us. And perhaps the most unsettling part is realizing that the new world doesn't need doors kicked in, only distracted hearts. This story is just one piece, and one day, maybe you'll see the whole puzzle. If this made you think, subscribe, like the video. It helps the channel grow. And don't forget to share. After all, more voices mean more discoveries.